Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Wombo Combo Podcast. I'm Breaky CPK, joined by that guy BSJ. Totally fresh here to start for a Tuesday evening. No, we're happy to be here though on what's a Tuesday evening, a little bit later on, even in the night than we're used to doing things. But you know, sometimes schedule changes, but we're making a point. Still going to be getting some content in for you guys to hopefully enjoy. So, of course, Breaky CPK here, joined by BSJ, fresh back from Ukraine, as mentioned, the minor event. Once again, how you doing, buddy?
Fresh is a loosely used term here. Fresh as in recently, yes. I just got done with like a 24-hour travel day, so
Okay.
starts off with a 4-hour bus ride, which was 25 people inside of a small bus. So,
Oh, geez.
by no means was that the highlight, though. The event was really fun. Even got to go skiing the day before the event started, so that was super cool. Never thought I'd ever ski in Ukraine, and
Yeah.
a lot of good Dota, a lot of good people there, and a lot of good food. So just an enjoyable event all around. So glad to be back though and get back into Dota. I did miss playing Dota.
A lot of great production as well, man. And again, I called it going in. Obviously, I've had the chance to work with those guys myself, and a fun group of guys. And the reaction from the community, I'm not even just saying that myself. I mean, it got a lot of praise from the community, especially for a minor event. So, as something tells me, it's not going to be the last time we see a WePlay tournament being hosted. So, yeah, well, you have fun working behind the scenes and everything?
Yeah, no, the whole thing was fun. I think the only issue everyone had was the fact that it was all condensed so much that there was like five best of threes, and then the third day had to start late with four best of threes.
Yeah.
And like we were starting to end at like 3 or 5 a.m. I think the entire thing was really well run, except for that.
Sure.
So everything behind the scenes was really nice. All the people working with us, the communication, like service, taking care of us and all that was great. So it wasn't just on the surface. Sometimes in tournaments, especially like TI, it can be really well produced, or it looks really clean to the public, but behind the scenes can be incredibly chaotic. But this time around, I'd say everything was as clean in the behind the scenes as it was on camera.
Sure.
So it was a nice, pleasant tournament to be a part of.
I am glad you brought that up, though, because that was definitely a little bit of a black eye of sorts, I think you could say, because I was feeling for you guys, man. I don't know if you had the late shift that night or if that was – I remember Lacoste being there as part – maybe like Lacoste and Cinnamon were part of it. I don't know if you're a cast, but you guys were up until like 4 or 5 a.m. even local time that one night.
Yeah, fortunately for me, I mean, the thing is – the only people that had it the worst was like Rich, who not only had to be up, but also had to do the first series the next day. Because they had less hosts, obviously, per thing than they did have casters and analysts. But I fortunately was always on the first through third series. So I kind of got like they purposely made everyone either be always night or always morning. So that was kind of nice in general, but obviously not ideal, like you said, to be up that late. But
what was it like working? I mean, he's totally not tuning in right now. What was it like working with Rob, AJG?
Oh, a nice guy. I'd never met him before.
I want your real thoughts. Come on.
No, I'm saying like he really is like a nice
joking.
guy. He has a lot to say, like a lot to talk about. Interesting perspective coming from like a different esport. He helped a lot with like the organization, because WePlay is kind of a, hey, casters, analysts, what do you guys think about the schedule? What should we do? And then he was the one that was kind of the intermediary person. So that was overall nice to have somebody else take care of that kind of stuff. And also just all around had some interesting talks with him about life stuff. That's the cool thing about getting like tight-knit community of casters and analysts, is that you slowly begin to develop relationships to the point that you're actually just having like every tournament is almost flowing from one to the other, in the sense that when you start the next tournament, you're just continuing from where you left off. So that's like a really cool thing. And he kind of just naturally settled into the whole group. So it was nice. It was nice like to have a new face, but also it's always nice to see the same face, familiar faces.
Good to hear. Good to hear. All right. Well, again, as far as the event went, sounds like you had some fun there behind the scenes, even as well as on camera. Of course, getting some good experience in. The event itself, though, it not only, again, production-wise wasn't great, but the matches. We definitely had some very solid matches throughout the tournament, and an interesting result in the sense that we had the team win it that we definitely predicted going into it, being Nigma, of course, and so they're going to be going to the major as a result, but it wasn't maybe as easy of a road as we thought it was going to be for Nigma by any means.
Yeah, I guess they had looked a bit shaky in the qualifiers, and they obviously looked a bit shaky in the first group stage games, but they managed to squeak it out, and they did that at TI 9 as well, where they just started in the lower bracket and got second. So clearly, this team is really good at grouping through a meta and figuring out the patch, whatever patch they may be in throughout the course of the tournament. So good on them overall. I mean, at the end of the day, they got the results. That's all that really matters, right? Going into the major, I think they drastically improved a lot over the course of the tournament, but I don't think they are good enough yet. Like in terms of they have not made it to the point where I'd be confident in them winning or placing top 4 in the major. I think as of now, I put them in the middle of the pack, and they are capable of growing much higher than that. So that's what I'm kind of predicting for that team individually going into the major. And, you know, I'll segue into our next point. On the opposite side, you have RNG, who looks like freaking studs in the group stage and even the first round of the playoffs, and kind of just collapsed. I think this all shows what experience does. You see how Enigma, despite their slow start, kind of their experience just carried them, you know, what it takes to win a tournament, what it takes to adjust. On the other side, you have a bunch of young, skilled players captained by you know, players like Super on RNG, and it just results in what we saw. I think Setsu made some really questionable plays as the tournament went on, and that had a lot, like those types of plays had a lot to do with why RNG lost. Just had games and managed to throw them away with a couple big feeds or a couple miscommunications.
Yeah.
And sadly, when you play against teams like Team Nigma, that's just enough to lose. So good. They had a good showing. They looked really good, but and I think this team's got a nice, bright future, and they just fell short, and that's how it goes.
Yeah, it's certainly nothing to be too disappointed about. It's easier for us to say, of course, knowing how close they were to the major and how great they were looking going into those grand finals even. Ultimately then coming up short 3-1 in that series against Nigma and the favorite team. But yeah, nothing to be disappointed about. Certainly not the last time we're going to see RNG, and certainly expect to see more of them down the line throughout the season as we continue on. It's still somewhat early on. We're not even at the halfway point yet when you really break it down. Of course, it's the second cycle right here of 5 total that we have to come. So now another team that, of course, we were naturally curious about how they would perform, being an NA team after all, the Fighting Pandas, and what to expect of them, Eternal Envy, the 50-50, whatever you want to say. They came out firing, man. They took out Nigma off the bat. So talking about Nigma's struggles a little bit, they defeated Nigma initially. They then lost to Gambit, though, in the winner's match of their group, and then they got the rematch, ultimately dropping that Series 3 game. So they got to play 9 games in the group stages. Couldn't make it out, though, man. That's
I mean, if you look at everyone else's group stage, like literally everyone else in the tournament, and you compare it to Fighting Pandas, who played Nigma twice and Gambit once, that's like a pretty rough set of games to play in a group stage. Just funny how that works out sometimes. But yeah, they were definitely somewhere between the 4th and 5th best team at that tournament, and could have even placed like 3rd or 2nd, I think, if they made it to the playoffs. And that's just how the cookie crumbles, man. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, they're a bunch of good players, right? Like,
yeah,
we were talking about at the tournament. Everyone's talking about how they're just an NA team stack or whatever, but you got a TI winner in Aoi, major winner in Moon Meander. You got Eternal Envy, who's won majors. You got Snake King, who's placed top 8 at TI. You got Bryle, who's like clearly one of the top 5 mid laners in the NA region. So by no means is that just a throw over or pushover team. Kind of give them more. I think people are kind of giving them less than they deserve in terms of the credit of that roster and the accolades that it has. So by no means did I expect them to give Nigma as much of a run for their money as they did, but I don't think that team's bad by any means. And I also think Nigma was worse than I expected them to be. So I think that was mainly what closed that gap. It wasn't Fighting Pandas being way better than I thought they were. I thought they were a solid team, but Nigma was just better, and kind of Nigma proved to be slightly better in the end. But early on, as you said, they lost 2-1 to Fighting Pandas the first day of the tournament. That was scary for Enigma fans, I'm sure. But it's crazy to think that Enigma can go from losing their first best of 3 to winning the whole tournament. That's the format, and I think it's really exciting. I really like the minor format after being at the minor itself and getting to see it up close. So I really enjoyed that.
I like the format. I will say, and to kind of go back to your point earlier, the condensed time is the one issue, though. The fact that it's, in this case especially, only having those 4 days, and clearly that was an issue, as we were pointing out, having the one day go way late into the night. And not only for obviously as a casters, I was also feeling for you guys, but you definitely got to feel for the players, too. And in the case, like, going back to Fighting Pandas, not to make an excuse for them, but they had to play the winners match, which, again, they lost in a grueling 3-game series against Gambit, and then they got a short break to then match up against Nigma in the elimination match right after. That in itself is a pretty brutal format in the sense of timing. Ideally, teams like that get at least a little bit of a break, whether it's a series in between or then the following day. So that's my one definitely thing when it comes to the scheduling part of it. But again, the format itself, for the minor, I certainly think that it's fine. I'm not annoyed that it's a GSL format with only 2 teams advancing on. Getting to the minor is obviously a difficult task in the first place, but we got to figure out the teams eventually. This also arguably gives these underdog teams slightly better chance as well, is another way to look at it too. So I'm just fine with that.
No, a lot of people are complaining, about, or like even mentioning the complaints of the players being tired, playing late. I don't know, man. I refuse to have sympathy in a lot of ways. The only sympathy I really have is that they have to go from one team to the next with no time to prep. That's like the main issue I have, because it does require you to prep, and then the opponent has been able to prep, and they've also been watching you play. So the fact that they're playing late is not what bothers me. It's the fact that they're not allowed to prep. So
sure,
I'm of the opinion that if you are a gamer, you've spent 14 hours in a row playing pubs before, and while competitive Dota is much more exhausting, like minute per minute comparison, by no means should a Dota player not be able to play to 4 a.m. for 2 best of 3s. It's not like they were playing 4 best of 3s that day individually. You know what I mean? So
that's true.
It kind of just that's like a shit happens scenario, in my opinion. Could it have maybe been organized better? Sure, but that's also not my job. So it's like the players knew what they were in for. It's not like they told them last minute. They told them the day before. They did tell them what the schedule was, and they knew if they lost a Gambit, they were going to be playing next series. And it's like, just don't lose to Gambit.
Just don't lose. I mean, come on.
Forehead.
that easy. That is fair. Yeah, it's, again, playing later into the night. Yeah, I'm with you there. I guess I don't necessarily have an issue with that. It is, like you said, the lack of break maybe in between is the one unfortunate thing. But, hey, no excuses here. Enigma certainly deserving the victory in the end as far as the tournament goes. So as far as the other side of things, again, we talked about how teams may be a little bit happy with their success in this event. On the other side, there were some teams, notably one that on the other NA side of things, NIP, Ninjas in Pajamas, man, they had a rough tournament, only getting to play 2 series. That's because they lost both of them 0-2, first to Geek Fam, and then in the follow-up in the elimination match to Team Spirit. Let's be honest. I mean, these are teams that, on paper, certainly more so Team Spirit. I mean, Geek Fam is a solid squad. Yeah, the roster change going in, but still a solid squad, sure. But Team Spirit, definitely a team that they should be able to beat. Losing at 0-2, it almost felt like just NIP didn't even come to play to show up, frankly.
Yeah, real quick before I complete my thoughts on NIP, in terms of performance from all teams, just to close this time subject thing, people in chat are talking about it. They're saying like Asian teams got it worse because it's like playing like 10 a.m. for them. It's like, well, how about the 9 o'clock series? Isn't that like playing for 2 a.m. for NA players? Yeah. Like we all got there 3 days early. Like you had time to acclimate.
Yeah.
Like it was a huge padding between when we got there and when the tournament started. So, if you're a fan, if you're a player, get over yourself. Like you had 3 days and everyone had some sort of disadvantage in some series. Come to win, come to play. Like if you're making the excuse you're tired, I got nothing for you.
If players were complaining about that, then I'm wholeheartedly with you there. That should not be something that's on them.
Like people also like to make comments from fans like, "Oh, my region or my team," or like some other region had the advantage. Like the only people who had the advantage, if anything, were the people that are from that area, like the
Yeah.
CIS teams. But then there's plenty of lands where it's in China, and like the CIS teams are on a 8-hour different time difference, and it's like it happens all the time. But like you had 3 days. So
Next major's in
when it
NA,
comes to
baby.
NIP, like disappointment to the max. I talked to Gunner a bit on the plane ride. We actually had the same. He lives in Connecticut, and I'm back in New York, so we both flew into JFK, same flight, same bus. Had quite a journey together. But I found out. I mean, he apparently got food poisoning the first day, which was pretty brutal for him. So he was like apparently sweating when he was playing the game. By no means was he using that as an excuse, but he was like, man, he basically was like, yeah, I know I did not play optimally, and it sucked to know that like I maybe could have played better if it weren't for that. And he also told me that the team decided to take the holidays off, and they only boot camped for like 2 days before the tournament. And for me, I'm just like, yeah, that's not an excuse, but you're also like not going to do well if you do that. So, there's experienced veterans on that team, and maybe after playing 10 years of competitive Dota or Han or whatever, they're just tired of not having any time to spend with friends and family. And so it's all priorities. But the teams that boot camp like RNG and like played leagues for the 2 or 3 weeks before the tournament compared to that are just going to play way better. And NIP has been a constant disappointment throughout the course of the year so far. And I'm kind of, because of what I talked to him about, I'm kind of like, okay, let's see how they do at the next qualifiers. But I'm skeptical. It's a healthy amount of skepticism towards what they can accomplish, because they haven't proven to me anything of significance with the roster they have so far. Even though Universe and PBD are world-renowned players in their respective positions.
What have you done for me lately?
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost brutal thing to say, but it's on it. When the game is shifting so much, I mean, we just had a massive patch, right? The game changed a lot of ways, and not to say that can't translate over. Obviously, it has for many players, but you do have to constantly keep up, and I think that's a very, very fair criticism you're bringing up. And the idea, if you're going to be a team that's trying to take this seriously, compete, especially, I mean, this is a minor, $300,000 on the line. It's a lot of money, and for somebody like PPD, that may not be as much. Being a former TI winner, he's obviously had a lot of success. And again, this is all theory crafting, or I don't have any evidence necessarily to back this up, but almost kind of going off what you're suggesting too, that a player like PPD may not be as interested in really practicing and competing as much as a player like Gunner, who's definitely hungry and who's newer to the scene and ready to compete. So I can completely see that scenario being realistic. Again, I don't have any evidence to back that up, but I definitely think that's something to keep an eye on and think about. Now, one more thing on this NIP subject, I will say, without giving sources, but I do have reason to believe NIP may not be a NIP team that we know coming up here in the near future. It's very possible. You've talked about
the organization or the roster.
Well, the roster itself. I can't say I've really gone deep into it, but I have reason to believe that the roster itself is certainly not going to be the same come the next minor. And I don't think that really is the most surprising thing, though, to suggest, right? Like, this is a team that replaced Skitter after they qualified. They replaced him with Tanner. Tanner taking mid, and really someone new, a player himself. Then that moved Gunner to the position 1, and that in itself kind of felt odd. And now that, as you're suggesting, the fact that they only played a couple of days before, really, as far as the tournament goes, with a completely new roster, I mean, come on. Something's just not right there, and it's almost unfair to players like a Gunner, who I said is like maybe hungry and really wants this, and the others maybe not as much. Again, I don't know exactly what is going on behind the scenes, but like I go back to, certainly believable scenarios.
All I know, like you have to find that right balance of how much do I talk about that I've talked about with the players, because if I talk about stuff that's personal, obviously they're just never going to talk to me again. I just know that with Skeeter specifically, there were personality issues. Like, people just didn't get along in terms of how they view Dota, as well as just in general, like, personality conflicts. And that happens in teams sometimes. And I know Peter is really reluctant to kick players based on like his past, with even in rough times with Team Optic and last year's NIP, he never kicked a player. So Just to be clear, he's not going to kick you just because he thinks you're underperforming. Like, that's not enough. He's going to kick you for reasons that he thinks are irrecoverable. And the personality conflicts on a team are just that. Like, if you don't see eye to eye as people, it's just not going to work, right? Like, that doesn't change. Somebody's not going to change their personality overnight. I mean, so I will say that, I mean, just regardless of what's happening behind the scenes and what any of us know, I thought they were going to change rosters, at least one player, because of how badly they did. But yeah, I'll just wait and see with that one. I wouldn't be surprised either way, based on what I've been told. I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to stick it out for one more major minor cycle, but I also wouldn't be terribly surprised at all if one or two, maybe even three players are gone from that team. So.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And got the major coming up after the major, as usual. Perhaps roster changes to come. Maybe even multiple teams. You never really know. But definitely want to keep an eye on moving forward there. So, all right, as far as the minor goes, I don't know if there's much else to say. Covering the what was necessary there. Enigma, again, the champions, and we'll be in the major coming up. So, another direction we did want to go, actually, before we do move on, was always fun to kind of look at the meta. And of course, this was not the first post-patch, but it was the first DPC event post-patch. Of course, we didn't have the one before that you also were a part of in Singapore there. But this also helped give us even a better idea of maybe what to expect coming up just around the corner when it comes to the major. Taking a look at some of these stats here, notably the number one picked hero, Rubik, actually on top of the list by a comfortable margin, had about a 50% win percentage, so nothing really too crazy there, I think. But one of the first things that actually stood out to me when looking just simply from a stats point of view was Phantom Lancer. Phantom Lancer kind of jumped up as far as a core, not coming out of nowhere by any means, but I don't know if a lot of people would have necessarily guessed PL to be the top pick safe lane core coming in, and he was 8-2 record as far as his overall win record goes, so pretty successful there.
No, I mean, I knew PL was going to be good this patch. I didn't know if he was going to be, when I say good, I mean, whenever PL's good, he's picked. It's kind of one of those heroes that you either see a pretty good amount of them or none of them. But usually in the past, good enough for PL meant third, fourth pick in the draft earliest. And this tournament, we saw, obviously, like you said, some first-rounded PLs. Yeah, I mean, I think he's just really good against the meta right now. He's good against Lich. He's good against Tree. He's good against Rubik. He's good against Disruptor. He's good against Abaddon. Even pretty decent against Omni Knight. And he's good against Drow. He's good against Venge. And good against Bat Rider. I'm naming like 8 of the top 10 picked heroes in the tournament right now. So the fact is, when you're a hero that's good against what's good and your numbers are respectably decent, like, you're going to be really good. Like, that's just, I'm not saying his numbers are not OP or anything. I'm just saying that his numbers are definitely good enough in terms of just like base stats, abilities, that kind of stuff to be viable. And then on top of that, he's good against what's good. So
sure.
The fact is, when you're a hero that's good against what's good, people have to pick out of meta weaker heroes to counter you, and that just never feels good. So it has to be like a very niche situation, and it's hard to lose the draft. And I also noticed this tournament that teams were able to make comebacks much easier, and they were also able to stall out games very well. And PL is one of the perfect heroes to capitalize on that meta. So overall, the meta for the tournament that I learned a lot about was teams' abilities to make comebacks, despite what everyone seems to believe about this patch being really snowbally, as well as, almost impossible to come back. And I saw countless teams be up by 5 to 10,000 gold before 25 minutes and lose. So I think part of that has to do with the quality of the teams, but I also think some of those games were very good Dota, and it was not 100% on the team winning that ruined it, right? So I think that's really nice going forward. For a meta, I think that's a very good dynamic to have in Dota. And I overall enjoyed seeing teams get better as the games went on. And a hero like PL is kind of just realizing, oh, we can do this in this meta. Okay, so like PL wasn't picked all that much at the start of the tournament, but suddenly people are picking him so much in the later portions, and I think that says a lot about the meta when you see that kind of thing. And I know I just went on a massive tangent about PL, but it does really summarize a lot about the tournament, so I wanted to make sure I got that in there.
Definitely. Yeah, and kind of going back to your point quickly too about some of the matches and the comeback there, and there was one I'm trying to find it now, but I know Nigma they were down like 40,000 net worth, weren't they?
Yeah,
One of their
Drow against Spectre, and
yeah.
they won.
Yeah, so it's certainly possible. It is certainly possible in this patch, and definitely a great example right there from this minor that we had. So yeah, there was Phantom Lancer as mentioned. Io for me was another one that kind of stood out because I remember even in the previous event we had mentioned how Io was one of the not picked, or I don't even know if he got banned many times if at all in the one esports tournament that we had just prior to this, and kind of a notable one for sure, but. All of a sudden, here this minor was picked 8 times, kind of in the middle, above average, and was 7-1 record. So
I was just banned all the other games.
Yeah, exactly. So Isle's back
It's
apparently.
not like it was picked less than these other heroes for any other reason than the fact that it was banned every game.
Yeah.
I think the neutral items are too good on IO. I think that's part of what makes IO puts him over the edge this patch. I really will say IO's kit's been they go for the 404 max farm, max overcharge build. But I think what really makes and breaks this hero is the fact that some of the neutral items are just so broken. Late game we saw I saw a craggy coat, essence ring, witless Shaco, 5-position IO. And it just has 3,000 health.
How do you kill that? Yeah.
20 armor and a extra 650 heal for their core. It's that's just bonkers. I hope they do make a patch before the next tournament or before the major. I really hope they do something to do with neutral items.
Really?
Like limiting one per hero, something like that.
You think before the major even?
I would like to see it personally.
Wow.
I think the neutral items are really cool, but I do think after seeing the IOs as well as the Huskars, kind of a breakout hero of the tournament also was Huskar. Got picked a lot more than I thought, especially by Enigma, who won it all.
Yep.
And there was just one game where he had craggy coat, paladin sword, and Mindbreaker, and it was just game changing that a Huskar that all he had was phase armlet halberd suddenly could participate in fights as a menace because he had 3 neutral items, and I think that's a problem. I do think that balance of the game is a problem. I think teams are purposely starting to pick one hero that would go double Wraithband Wand in terms of the mid lane, safe lane. They'd have one hero that did the double Wraithband Wand or double Null Wand, and then the other core was a core that doesn't do that, where it's they go straight for 1 or 2 big items, and then all the neutral items are dumped onto the one core. And it was a very interesting meta shift. If you actually look back at the drafts, it was really cool to notice at the end of the tournament that almost every team was starting to have one core that purposely had 1 or 2 big items, and the other core had a bunch of small ones. It was kind of interesting.
There's so many tangents I can go off of with that too, and I don't want to, I don't want to.
We gotta be careful, right?
Because it is interesting what you said about the idea of even having a patch between the minor and the major. I'm sitting here trying to think about how I feel about that personally, because obviously we did have a patch come out right before the minor, and that in itself is a little bit okay, kind of caught off guard there. But there were certainly some heroes
were still picked.
exactly, like Puck and whatever. They were certainly noteworthy nerfs and definitely needed, but it's still, as you just pointed out, I mean, they were still picked. Whether that's because of the lack of time to adapt to it, I mean, who knows, I guess, in the end, but it feels like, the heroes are still certainly relevant for sure. So I just, it is tough for me to grasp this idea of making changes off of a minor, an 8-team minor, with 1 week in between to then make changes and then have the 16-team major take place. I feel like just play it out, whether or not it's a little bit more RNG heavy than we like. It goes back to the logic that we said before, right, where just because there is more randomness in the game, it doesn't necessarily mean teams can still work around that to an extent. I bring up the poker analogy all the time. Yes, poker is very random, but putting yourselves in the best positions to take advantage of said randomness is where the teams are definitely going to shine. And going back to your point that you were just suggesting there with teams and how they were working it out when it came to the minor play. So, I'm sure these major teams certainly watching that as well, going to take some insight there. And now we'll have a major with 16 teams, many more matches to be played. Then we'll really be able to analyze where the game is at and then make changes accordingly, I feel like. Well, certainly going to be something, I feel like, because maybe the randomness is a little bit too much, but let's have the major first. and then see where we're at, I think.
I'm fine with that approach too, but I also like how I wouldn't mind if they just decided, hey, like we've seen enough of these neutral items being like just too much with the RNG. But hey,
Yeah.
either way, like you said, if they leave it as is, teams know that they'll just draft accordingly. Sometimes you'll have game breaking luck, but for the most part, 90% of Dota games, the RNG of the neutral items has very little to no impact on the winner. So
Hey, Samail loves it.
yeah, I mean, I still love the mechanic. I love the mechanic. I think it's super fun and good for the game. But I think every mechanic introduced, just like when shrines came out, I think shrines were fine for Dota, but when they came out with 2 outside of
In the
base and 5
base,
inside of base,
yeah.
that's like insane, right? So tone it down a little bit in terms of how much impact it has, but leave them in the game. So.
Well, and we know that Ice Frog and the balance team is certainly not afraid to make changes when, like, they obviously went over the top with this patch, and it was fun to see, but they're not afraid to tone it down when needed. And yeah, I'm sure neutral item changes are coming again post major. Would be my bet for that. So
Okay.
all right, major. Speaking of that major, unless there's anything else stat wise that you wanted to bring
Nah,
up
man,
here.
I've talked out of my ass.
All right.
So let's move on.
Done that plenty here with the minor that you're at. So the major that we got coming out, this is Dream League officially. Of course, that's going to be happening. Dream League Season 13. The Leipzig major. Leipzig, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Anyways, it's going to be there. And, of course, as mentioned, 16 teams competing. One of those 16 teams is going to be TNC. TNC, of course, the previous major winners. Now, there was a little asterisk there in terms of we didn't have all the teams that we expected, or not necessarily expected, but you get the point. We didn't have Secret, we didn't have OG, etc., X-Liquid and crew. We at least have most of those teams now. Well, I guess it's kind of hacked because it's the X-Liquid, Nigma, and then Secret. LGD, of course, didn't even qualify for the minor, and then you had OG not playing once again. But point is, definitely a bit of a step up, and with this big patch and everything. Expectations for TNC. Is this feel like a patch that maybe is going to be good for them, and perhaps a good result here?
I don't think so. So far, they haven't proven that they can play the meta heroes. Like, I feel that they were owning with what they did last patch, and what they did was just play the heroes better than other people. Like, they were so much better at Morph Shaker. They were really the only team that really knew how to play carry Night Stalker to its optimal potential. And they just had 3 or 4 strats last patch that seemed that they just were above and beyond the skill and execution at those specific strats than all the other teams. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that coming into this next tournament. I think that was really their main advantage. And clearly, based on the Singapore event, the heroes that are meta right now are not their best strong suit. So they either had to drastically improve on those heroes, or they had to figure out a way to counter those heroes with heroes of their own that are good enough. At the start of the patch, heroes like Veno were really good or considered good, and that was like a KP special, but now not so much. As of now, I think they do have a lot to prove, as TNC, to me at least. I would put them somewhere between like 6th to 12th. I think 6th would be about as good as I give them, and 12th would be hopefully as bad as they would do. So yeah, that's about where I put them.
Okay. As far as myself goes, this is a team that I didn't take away their success at the first major, but I certainly was not afraid to suggest, and I still kind of stand there in the sense that I just don't know if I can see the continued momentum with them. Now, that was before this big patch came out, a somewhat chaotic patch with the neutral items and objectives and everything. And, who's to say they can't find those specific niche meta heroes that they're going to be the ones to lead the way. It's certainly possible. I definitely still want to stand by, though, what I said after the first major right there. So I'm not going to necessarily change. One thing I do want to bring up, though, is that just, was it yesterday even, or maybe even early today? They officially announced Febby is going to be their new coach. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, a very smart player, of course, with great history himself.
Good dance moves.
Good dance moves, apparently. So, definitely something to look for there if you happen to be at the major. No, but Febby is going to bring his knowledge to the team. And I find it interesting that he's coming in a little bit later on, where, we're less than a week away in terms of the major starting. So, he could still certainly have great impact there, but it's maybe a little less time than you would hope for in terms of picking up a solid coach and really getting you ready for a tournament. So again, I think that helps. I definitely still don't have the highest expectations. I kind of agree with you. The middle of the pack sounds about right to me. If they manage to even get a top 3 finish, let alone win the whole thing, I will honestly be very, very shocked at that. But
you've been kind of skeptical about them the entire year, even
yeah,
like saying like even though they won this major, you're not too convinced. So
exactly.
this will be the either coming of your prophecy or the
or I might
slap
as well
in the face.
retire because
Yeah, exactly.
they got me there. It's anything is possible certainly, but no, I am going to stand by what I said before, and think that
I respect that. Conviction is
unfortunately,
good.
exactly. Unfortunately, the struggles may continue, but again, Febby solid coach for sure for them. So we'll look to see what he's able to provide there for the team. Another thing to kind of look at as far as speaking of that, I mean, which teams have the most to prove in this event? Again, we're dealing with 16 teams here. Nigma, the 16th, just qualifying from the minors. Are any that come to mind as far as, which team's going to this where they need, not necessarily to win it all, but just really need a good result to show that, okay, here they are finally?
The number one teams that the general description I'm going to give of the teams I think have something to prove are the teams that I think are supposed to be at the top and haven't proven that yet, or the teams that are capable, and I believe that they could be, but they could also flop. So first off, I think Team Nigma, first and foremost, from the minor, see what they can do carrying forward. Obviously, second place TI, but what else can they do for me going into this major? Not just winning the minor. Like we've seen a lot of these minor teams go quite far. Even in the last 2 years, or like a year and plus the first event this year with IG, Vici last year. So Nigma's one for me. Chaos Esports, I think they looked sick at the start of the year. Quincy Crew, obviously they had some slow start, little issues going there, but I think they could easily get top 4 if they really just are as strong as I think they could potentially be. Virtus Pro, for the same reasons, it's kind of like Team Nigma, like an established team that also hasn't really proven themselves this year. Yeah, they're like a new roster, but I think that they are yet to prove to me that they're solidified. We already kind of talked about TNC, and then the other one for me would really be Alliance, just because they've kind of given like glimpses of greatness and glimpses of like kind of meh throughout the course of this year so far. And I think this will kind of be for me that what decides what side of the teeter-totter is going to take over. So
Sure.
those are really my main teams that I'm looking out for to see how they do this tournament.
Okay, definitely, somewhat repetitive here. I agree on most of those. More so, Virtus Pro more so than anything, just because that name brand, the namesake that they bring to the table. Resolution, of course, still to this day, one of the more notorious players and well-known players. So are they? Is VP finally actually back, or will they have a bit of a struggle? And of course, a completely different roster, so it's almost silly to put these high expectations on them from the previous years. But the brand is still there. They still have a couple of players, of course, and no one in solo from the previous squad, and certainly capable of playing pretty well. So they definitely, for me too. EG, I mean, hands down, has to be. I still. And I know I said they don't necessarily have to win it, but man, in EG's case, I almost want to say they have to win this event. It's just something about this team, man. They continue to get so close, but when are they going to get over that hump? Will it finally be at this Dream League? I hope so for their sake. And maybe that'll really show us that this logo change was needed. Because, hey, if they win after the logo change, then everything goes away, right? So as far as the criticism there. So I'm sure some extra pressure from behind the scenes there for them. No, but on a serious note, Team Secret, then the last team I wanted to bring up there on that topic. Again, this is a squad that fantastic last year, the number one team during the regular season, if you want to put it that way, for the DPC. Certainly some very high expectations, understandably, going into this season as well. This is their first cycle they're playing. Didn't play the first cycle, as mentioned. So I think it's important for them, certainly, to get off to a good start here in this major. And anything less than a top 4 finish for a team like Team Secret, especially not competing in the first cycle, will be pretty disappointing in my mind. So that's what I got for them. All right.
I agree with the fact that teams like Team Secret have a lot to prove to in general, but like to me, I guess for them, I have a lot of faith. So That's why I don't put them on my list, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So for all I know, I could just be way wrong, and they just botch out at 8th, and I'd definitely be disappointed. But I just don't expect it. We'll just have to see it in that regard.
That's the thing with this patch, though, man. It's again, it's so hard to gauge. This being the first big tournament now, really since the patch, in the sense of a major and a 16-team tournament, a lot of matches to be played. So we certainly are going to finally now learn a lot about where the game is really at. So yes, high expectations a secret, and that is fair to state that. Yeah, you definitely kind of expect it anyway. So. As far as the 16 teams in the event, one other thing that is noteworthy as well, going kind of back to TNC, let's not forget, too, that in the Southeast Asian qualifiers, they actually almost didn't even qualify for the major. They had to play a third game in their qualifiers in the third-place match against a team called Signal Ultra, who actually ended up DCing in that third game. Yes, TNC was up, but still, it's like it was kind of crazy, the fact that the defending major champions were on the verge of not even making the next major. But they did, and of course, anything can happen now. A lot of prep time since then. It's been, easily a month and a half since the qualifiers, man. It feels like it's been so long since they took place. So
it is crazy, huh?
Yeah, how long? And actually, December 1st through the 3rd. So, yeah, it's
been more than almost a month and a half.
It's a month and a half. That's okay. That's a little too, holiday break, though. I mean, it happens, but man, that is a long freaking time. All right. Anyways, then another topic to go over is, if it just creates any more discussion, but which team will be kind of the biggest surprise at this event? Maybe one that we're not necessarily on the radar as much, but you kind of already touched on it a little bit, I guess, in Chaos, right? Like, Chaos is maybe a team that's coming up quickly as far as the ranks go, and not only a bit to prove, but maybe a surprise if they do well for a lot of people.
You think it's going to be surprised if they do well?
I think it will be, yeah. I mean, okay. I don't care what success they've had in the qualifiers to get to this point. And this is a different ballgame, right? I mean, you're playing against the best of the best in the world now on the world stage, and a team that, had struggles in the first cycle here. So I would be surprised. I really would if they managed to have let's say, a top 6 finish.
Interesting. Okay. I give them a lot of cred. So I'll one of us is going to be wrong. That's
I guess
that's always nice, right? But also, Breaky, what that means is one of us is going to be right. And if 50-50 for being right, that's better odds than I usually got. So
there you go.
I'll take it.
There you go. All right. So, of course, the South American teams, too. It's always kind of fall into this, right, as far as a surprise team goes. But certainly Beast Coast is, as always, one to look out for. So we'll see from them, too. But the major starts, when does it start? It starts this weekend, right? Yeah, that's why we're doing the preview here, January 18th. So that would be Saturday. So, of course, when it comes to the major and the format, it's spread out a lot more. It's 18th through the 26th. So it starts this Saturday, goes all the way into the following Sunday. It's as the format has been decided by Valve and the DPC. You have the 4 GSL group stages, best of 3. Everyone advances on. It's top 2 to the winner side, bottom 2 to the lower bracket, and then best of 1 initial round. It's pretty much the TI format in that sense, as far as advancing on there. So, a lot of matches to be played, and some damn good Dota that we get to be watching here coming up. Always look forward to these big-time tournaments, especially after a big patch. So, not much else to say other than let's do the ultimate prediction, right? Like, who's going to win this thing? It's an easy guess. I mean, 16 teams, anything can happen with this patch. If you had to predict one team, though, who would it be, BSJ?
If I had to predict one team, it would be I've been thinking about this, and it's been a tough one because I've kind of tossed up amongst 3 or 4 teams, but I'm going to predict. I'm going to go with Vici. And if my one sleeper pick to make me look like a genius if it happens is Chaos.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, out of all teams that nobody would predict to win, that's my team.
I certainly wouldn't. Yeah,
I know we already had that. It isn't just to slam this in your face. Like, they're the team that has the most to prove to me, because I think they're either going to get 12th or they're going to be like super dope, and they're just going to like make a huge run at this tournament. So
they're like the J Storm of last tournament. I feel like we said the same thing about them.
Well, the thing about J-Storm was, to be completely honest, I knew they had zero chance to win the tournament. Like, whether or not they get 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, 12th, whatever, they're not going to win. But, like, Chaos, I think, has a non-0% chance to win this tournament. So that's why I'm leaving them as my, like, crazy pick to potentially take it. What about you, Greggy? What are you thinking?
You know, I kind of chuckled a little bit when you said Vici Gaming because I was actually going to say them too. And I hate to say that because, you know, here we are, two guys.
Wow, nice cop-out
answer. I know,
right?
right? Just the cop-out answer, but I've always I continue to be impressed by Vici Gaming. I still to this day, I've been saying this for the last couple of years. I still think they arguably have the best 1-2 punch as far as their position 1 and position 2 players in Eurus, aka Paparazzi and Ori. And when you got that working for you, it's certainly tournament victory is a very real grasp for them. So I am going to go with Vici Gaming as well. As far as I kind of like the idea of that sleeper pick there, and who can maybe surprise us all. And you know, I'm always trouble with it because the same thing happens with me with back in the day with Complexity as well. I've been a Complexity fanboy for the longest time, and I've done it before with them, and they just completely flop. And
you guys predicting Complexity to do well.
Yeah, you know all about that, right? So, Team Liquid though is going to be it for me. So I'm going to do it again if we had to do it. Let's go, Team Liquid Han boys. They're gonna not do well now. Oh boy, I just jinxed them. I'm sorry, guys. No, this is still a team that I've been so happy to see their progress through the years. But man, it's like just when they start really getting good, it just seems like it flops once again. So they got Blitz as a coach, though. Very, very smart individual, of course, especially when it comes to Dota. So I think he's going to be having his boys prepared. And Sandy, a great captain, and certainly the skill is there. If they could just stop throwing games, please. Stop the throwing. All right,
stop picking gyro.
Stop picking gyro. Stop doing silly things post 30 minutes into the game and thinking they have to win when you don't, etc. There you go. All right. Yeah, I'm excited though, man. It's so again, it kicks off this Saturday. Certainly going to be looking forward to watching it. And next week's show, we're going to come back and kind of review at least how the initial start of the event went. That'll be the plan, I suppose, when it comes to that. But I think that pretty much does it, though, as far as not only the preview of the major, but in general, as the podcast this episode goes. Anything else on your mind there, BSJ?
I'm good, man. I think we're ready to see what happens in the major and talk about impressions next week. I'm looking forward to seeing what I learned from the minor kind of translating into what the major teams do, whether or not it's just completely different and all the minor teams are trash, or if I kind of see some remnants of what I learned and what I think all the other teams also learned at the minor. So curious. I'm really fascinated to see how much of that translates to Tier 1, Tier 2 Dota.
The continued evolution of the patch. It's always one of the many great things about watching a game like competitive Dota, and certainly going to be plenty of that here to expect and to be entertained by starting this Saturday. So really want to thank you guys for tuning into the podcast. Be sure to let your friends know, let others know that the show does exist. We definitely have been doing a pretty good job, I feel like, of keeping the show going throughout this season, even at the start of the season there.
Speak for yourself.
All right. But no, it's been a lot of fun and always great to talk Dota. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. And we already expect to see you next week and looking forward to it. So enjoy the major, guys. We'll see you next week. Until then, have a good night.